They say every soldier leaves something behind. Some leave blood, others leave sanity. Me, they took my weapon. And with it, they thought they took me. I remember the moment down to the microsecond, the humming metal of the dropship vibrating beneath my boots, the warm weight of my pulse rifle snug against my chest, the scent of copper and polymer from the rebreather feeding clean air into my lungs. We just breached the orbit of Viral 7, a contested mining world caught between our fractured Earth coalition and the ruthless hierarchy of the Adelid Dominion. The Aelyd were supposed to be predictable, arrogant, slow to adapt. Turns out, they weren't. Our convoy was ambushed by a gravity snare net. We dropped like stones. 5 ships gone. My squad gone. The rest, scattered across kilometers of hostile terrain, assumed dead or worse. I remember the silence that followed, the kind of silence that presses against your eardrums and dares you to breathe. I did. And the second I did, they came for me, not with guns or blades, but with machines, shimmering drones made of some kind of liquid crystal alloy. They pulsed with a synthetic intelligence that read my stance, calculated my threat level, and struck with surgical precision. I tried to raise my rifle, but it was gone. Not dropped, not lost, vaporized. A blue arc of energy swept through my gear like a scalpel. My armor fried, my HUD shattered, my weapon, the one I'd trained with since orbital cadet school, the one I'd modified with custom grips and a scar etched from every mission, disintegrated in my hands. That's when I felt the burn. Something inside me snapped. I wasn't trained for surrender. I was trained for survival, for adaptation, for becoming the edge when the blade was gone. The Aelyd didn't understand humans. Not really. They still believed weapons were things you held. They didn't know we become them. The jungle on Viral 7 is alive in ways most ecosystems aren't. Everything breathes. Everything watches. Vines throb with bioluminescent patterns, like veins in a dreaming beast. I ran, barefoot, half-armored, bleeding from where the energy arc had kissed skin. And somehow, I was still the predator. I fashioned my first kill with a sharpened piece of wreckage. A scout drone. It was too curious, too slow. I learned how its core powered the others. Hive minds, even here. I crushed it under a fallen branch, tore out its emitter, and strapped it to my arm like a bracer. Primitive? Sure. But it gave off a signal I could follow. A pulse. A beat. I wasn't alone. That night, while the twin moons bled to the canopy, I listened to my heart echo with the same rhythm as the machine I'd ripped apart. The jungle accepted me, not as intruder, but as something new, something it hadn't seen before. I wasn't a soldier anymore. I was a weapon still in the forge. The next morning, I found them. 3 of my team, burned unconscious, suspended in cocoon-like structures high in the canopy, alive but barely. The Aelyd were doing something to them. Extracting neural data? Biometrics? It didn't matter. I climbed the vines like a feral animal. No rifle. No helmet. Just a cracked exo-armored gauntlet. Scavenged circuitry and instincts honed beyond doctrine. I got them down. Then I made a promise. Not just to my team. Not to the coalition. But to myself. If the Aelyd wanted to erase our tools, if they wanted to strip us of our gear, our tech, our symbols of power, fine. But they forgot something. You can melt a rifle. You can crush a drone. But the most dangerous weapon in the galaxy has always been human will. You don't realize how much you rely on tools until they're gone. Out here, tools mean survival. But survival, that's something we humans carry in our marrow. I spent the next 3 days forging fire with shattered HUD glass and torn synth fiber. I cut vines with drone shards and boiled water, using the remnants of a pulse core I scavenged from a ruptured recon bot. My teammates, Caro, SEF, and Mendez, barely stirred. Whatever the Aelyd had done left them in a neural haze, their eyes flicking with memory ghosts, their voices muttering command codes to enemies who weren't there. I didn't rest. I couldn't. The jungle was alive and watching, but so was something worse. The Aelyd weren't gone. They didn't kill us because we were threats. They left us because they wanted to study us, observe us, understand what made humans fight, after their weapons were stripped away. They'd made a mistake, because I wasn't trying to survive anymore. I was evolving. I built my first true weapon on the 4th day. Not a gun, not a blade, a signal diverter. The emitter core from the drone was laced with programmable matter. Aelyd Tech Pulse with adaptive AI if you knew how to feed it. I injected it with feedback from my neural implant, using heat from volcanic vents to stabilize the charge. I whispered to it, not words, intention, and the machine responded. That night, I set it off, not as a trap, but as a beacon. Let them come. Let them think I was limping, damaged, desperate. Let them believe their experiment was still under control. They wanted to know what a human could become without her weapon. They were about to find out. They came at midnight, tall, smooth-bodied figures in refractor suits, eyes glowing with unreadable intelligence. Aelyd Retrieval Team. 3 of them. They didn't come with guns. They came with restraints, containment fields, arrogance. They never spoke. The Aelyd don't speak to prey. One of them approached me, sinewy limbs moving with mechanical grace, scanning my vitals. My wrists were bound behind me, mouth dry from hunger. I looked up at him from where I knelt in the ash. Then I smiled, because I wanted them close. Because humans are predators, but we're also actors. And sometimes the most dangerous strike is the one they never see. The pulse core on my wrist activated on a biometric cue, my rising heart rate. It sent out a data surge in a dead Aelyd frequency. The Aelyd tech around me shuddered. The closest one staggered as his shield collapsed, systems glitching. He moved to react, but he was too slow. I was already moving, rolling forward, grabbing the stinger blade from his side, jamming it upward through the weak point beneath his mandible armor. His glow faded. The other 2 raised their shock spears, but I didn't retreat. I charged. I ducked the first arc, pivoted, and used the dead Aelyd's body like a shield, absorbing the hit before I dropped and swept the second one's legs. Humans aren't faster. We're just more brutal. They didn't expect the knee to the throat. They didn't expect me to drive a broken drone, casing into the soft joint of their breathing vents. They didn't expect me to win. When it was over, I stood there breathing hard, surrounded by the broken pieces of what they called superior species. I picked up their restraints and started crafting again, not to escape, to hunt. Over the next week, I built what I called the Whisper Harness, a repurposed exo-rig from Aelyd joints and limb tension tech. It was fast, light, reactive to thought. I melded drone optics into a monocular rig that gave me heat, motion, and energy signatures. The broken pulse core now sat in the chest, synced to my heartbeat. I wasn't just armed again. I was something new, something born of steel, sweat, and rage. When Carol finally woke, blinking like a child, he stared at me in silence for a long time. Then he croaked, "What the hell happened to you?" I didn't answer, not because I didn't know, but because there wasn't a word for what I was becoming. Not yet. They thought they could break me by taking away my weapon, but all they did was remove the last thing that kept me human. Now, I wasn't bound by rules. I wasn't a soldier. I wasn't a prisoner. I was the war itself. And I was heading straight into the Aelyd's heart, to make them choke on the future they created. The Whisper Harness whispered to me, not with words. No, words were for orders, for protocol, for the old life. This was instinct sharpened by alien steel, intuition fused with battlefield logic. The more I moved through the jungle, the more the tech responded. Like, it was learning me as much as I was learning it. And that's when I realized something chilling. Aelyd tech wasn't just mechanical. It was biological, semi-sentient, designed to imprint and obey a neural pattern. They wanted to know what humans became without weapons. They forgot we're the only species that turns every tool into a mirror of ourselves. So I shaped the harness to my mind, willed it into silence, into speed, into vengeance. And it listened. I left the others behind, Caro SEF Mendez, tucked inside a camouflage alcove beneath the roots of a massive thor tree. They were still too weak to follow, but strong enough to live. For now, I had one goal: infiltrate the Aelyd outpost marked by the drone signal I'd hijacked. One goal and one reason: to find out why we weren't dead, why they were keeping humans alive. The Aelyd don't build bases like we do. No walls, no fences. Their outposts grow like tumors, alive, pulsing, embedded into the environment. Half organic, half synthetic structures twisted with living metal, nested into the terrain like spider webs laced with alien logic. The one I found was massive, a biolattice dome wrapped in glowing filaments that pulsed like veins. It rose from the jungle floor, like a predator opening its mouth. I approached low, covered in mud, camel cloak fused from harvested exoskin. The whisper harness matched my breathing, every servo shifting in silence. Then I saw it. Not soldiers, not scientists, prisoners. Dozens of them, human, Threxian, Voltar, even a Zealand or two. Species that didn't ally, didn't coexist, and sure as hell didn't get captured together. They were hanging like fruit in transparent sacks. Alive, sedated, monitored, but not drained. Copied. That's when I saw the harvesters. Aelyd drones with surgical tendrils moved from pod to pod, extracting neural mappings, emotional signatures, instinctual reflex loops. They were recording us, not to understand, to replicate. And that's when the truth hit me like a punch to the ribs. The Aelyd weren't just fighting us. They were trying to become us. I slipped deeper into the outpost, past guard clusters and sensor webs. The whisper harness synced to the heartbeat of the structure itself, tapping into its rhythm. I moved between shadows like I belonged there, and I found the core, a command node, spherical, humming with a pulse that wasn't just energy. It was thought. Inside, encased in a crystalline suspension field, was something that made my breath stop. Not a weapon, not a leader, a copy of me. She floated in the gel, unconscious but alive. Neural ports embedded into her skull, reflex maps etched into 1,000 fiber lines running outward like spider silk. Her body was identical, down to the scar over the left rib, where my ribs were cracked during lunar training, down to the faded tattoo of Earth's continents around the inside of her wrist. My twin, my stolen blueprint, a weapon in the making. And suddenly I understood. They didn't take my weapon. They made one for me. I moved fast. Impulse overriding strategy. Slammed a shock charge into the crystalline matrix. Grabbed the floating form as it collapsed and ran. Alarm screamed. Drones swarmed. I was no longer hidden. I didn't care, because they hadn't just tried to copy me. They'd failed. And now I had her, whatever she was, a clone, a biosimulacrum, a mirror image sculpted from scans and stolen instincts. She wasn't just data. She was a warning, proof that the Aelyd fear humanity so much they weren't just trying to destroy us. They were trying to replace us. I made it out of the hive under moonlight soaked in blue fire. Their perimeter cracked open by the pulse overload I triggered on the whisper harness. Drones fell. The trees burned. I didn't stop, didn't look back. She was unconscious in my arms, breathing, her heartbeat synced to mine. And I knew right then, they had no idea what they'd done. They thought they'd taken my weapon. Instead, they gave me a second one. And this time, we were going to war together. She woke screaming, not with sound. Her lips never moved, but with thought. A telepathic pulse burst from her, like a thunderclap, through the jungle's still morning. It slammed into my skull with the force of a concussion grenade, knocking me backward into the mud. Caro and SEF scrambled from their hideout, weapons raised, makeshift, barely functioning but ready. Then they saw her, me. Their jaws slackened. Their minds froze. "What the hell is this, Lieutenant?" Caro hissed, voice low, trembling with suspicion and awe. I didn't answer right away, because I wasn't sure either. She was me. Same eyes, same voice, same scars. But there was something off, sharper, too calm, like a version of myself that had never known fear, or perhaps one that had never known choice. She looked at me like a puzzle she had almost solved. "I am designation 17 Alpha," she said finally, her voice a perfect imitation of my own, but without the fatigue. Constructed from combat reflexes, emotional profile scans, and neural loop matrices extracted during containment. I stared at her, heart thudding. They built you to be me. No, she said, tilting her head. They built me to be better than you. I should have been angry. I should have felt threatened. Instead, I laughed. Bitter. Dry. You think the Aelyd understand what better means when it comes to humans? She blinked. A flicker of uncertainty crossed her otherwise expressionless face. They extracted tactics, physical resilience, behavioral templates. She replied, robotic but hesitant. They modeled emotional stress thresholds, adaptability patterns. I stepped closer. My voice dropped, but they didn't model the thing that matters most. Her eyes narrowed, curious. Choice. That night, we sat around a low fire built from scavenged fusion cell remnants. The three survivors, Caro, SEF, Mendez, and the duplicate. My reflection. We didn't sleep. No one trusted her. Not really. She didn't even trust herself. She confessed that she wasn't the only one, that she had emerged from a series, at least 20 prototypes based on various captured humans. But she was the only one that remained stable. The others broke down, lost identity, turned violent or inert. I wasn't built for war, she said quietly. I was built to survive it. Caro spat into the ash. That's not human. I shook my head. That's exactly human. By dawn, we had a plan. The Aelyd weren't just experimenting with human biology. They were weaponizing it, building infiltration units, simulacra, shaping our instincts into programmable assets. But to do that, they needed raw data, which meant the other prisoners, still hanging in that hive like fruit, were in danger of becoming blueprints too. I couldn't allow that. We couldn't allow that. So we decided to do what humans have always done when backed into a corner. Strike back, not with overwhelming force, not with superior tech, with chaos, subversion, guile. We scouted the outpost from a ridge covered in thick moss-veined foliage. Drones patrolled in waves now, nervous, alert. I could see the burn scars where my last infiltration had left its mark. They were adapting. Good. So were we. 17 Alpha interfaced with their systems using her neural link. She showed us weak points, biological vulnerabilities where the hive's living metal couldn't self-heal fast enough. She exposed air channels we could poison, light channels we could blind, control nodes we could corrupt. You're sure you're still on our side? SEF asked her sharply. I don't know what side I'm on, she replied, but I know what I don't want to be. We struck under a storm. Rain hissing against the canopy, lightning turning the jungle into a strobe-lit nightmare. The Whisper harness and 17 Alpha moved as one, two shadows slipping between sentries and sensors. We planted feedback nodes, pulse disruptors, spoofed identity tags, and then we triggered them all. The hive screamed. Their whole structure convulsed as logic loops shattered. Harvesters went berserk, slicing their own conduits. The Aelyd scrambled to contain the overload. That's when we moved in. Blades, fire, plasma arcs, rage, and something far worse. Hope. The prisoners were pulled down, woken, armed with scraps. Their eyes blaze with vengeance only the truly broken understand. One by one, we turned victims into rebels. The hive fell within hours. But that wasn't the real victory. As the structure crumbled behind us and smoke rose into the storm-torn sky, 17 Alpha stood beside me, expression unreadable. You were right, she said. About what? They took your weapon. She looked at her hands, then at the sky, but they gave me a soul. War doesn't end when the shooting stops. Sometimes it begins after the fires die out. We reduced the hive to ashes, freed 24 prisoners from stasis cocoons, shattered their illusion of control. But even as we regrouped in the shadow of the wreckage, I knew it wasn't over. Not with the way the sky pulsed that sickly blue, not with the static crawling at the edges of my thoughts, and not with the way 17 Alpha froze, head cocked like she was listening to something far away, something wrong. They know, she whispered. What do you mean? I asked. Her gaze found mine, sharp and haunted. They're sending it. The Aelyd have a hierarchy. A chain of intellect stretching from coldly logical command drones to strategic overseers. But above even them, there are entities that don't think the way we do. They don't command. They consume. They don't copy. They overwrite. We never had a name for them because no one had survived long enough to report back. But the prisoners from the hive, the ones who could speak, had a term from other species, whisper across battlefields like a curse. The silencer. We moved quickly. Too quickly. The jungle blurred past in a wet green haze as we climbed the ridges leading away from the old hive ruins. 17 of us now, including civilian scientists, soldiers of broken armies. And 17 Alpha, the mirror who walked like me, moved like me, but now chose differently. I carried a scrap of Aelyd code in a pulse shard wired to my forearm, a signal key, one of their own command relays, sliced in the hive before it fell. We thought we could use it. Maybe signal a false withdrawal. Maybe lie to the silencer. We were wrong. It found us by dusk. No warning. No sound. Just absence. The jungle went dead. Birds vanished. Vines retracted. The rain stopped falling midair, hovering like frozen tears. And then it stepped into view. Not large. Not monstrous. Worse. It was perfect. A figure wrapped in undulating chrome skin, smooth and unbroken, no eyes, no mouth. Only a shape meant to erase identity. Every step it took, the earth beneath it withered, not burned, expired. Like the very code of reality couldn't tolerate its presence. Caro tried to raise his weapon. Didn't even fire before he crumpled, blood leaking from ears and nose. It hadn't touched him, just looked at him. We ran. We scattered like animals into the trees. I dragged 17 Alpha behind me, breath ragged, whisper harness overclocking its servos to keep up. What is it doing? I shouted. It's not killing, she said, her voice eerily calm. Not yet. It's learning. I didn't understand until I did. It didn't come to destroy us. It came to watch us destroy each other first. We regrouped at the crash site of an old Earth Coalition frigate, half buried in vines. I remembered her designation, TCS Malachite, lost in the early days of the war. Her hull was broken, but the core was intact. And her AI, faint but alive, intrusion detected. The AI said an afraid voice as we entered the bridge. Unknown Aelyd signature pursuing. Defensive systems offline. Recommend evacuation. No, I replied. We make our stand here. SEF looked at me like I'd gone mad. Against that thing? No choice, I said. This isn't a drone. It's a damn doomsday algorithm in a skin suit. Then what do we do? I turned to 17 Alpha, and for the first time asked her, what would you do? She blinked. She looked around. Then she said, slowly, they made me from fear. Reflex. Code. But you gave me something else. I waited. Choice. She pulled the cracked neural rig from the Malachite's console, plugged herself into the old system. What are you doing? I asked. She didn't answer right away. Then, I'm going to teach it something the Aelyd never learned. What? Fear. The silencer arrived with the setting sun, standing motionless before the shipwreck, like a god waiting to be obeyed. It raised its hand. The world shivered. Reality buckled around it like waves in a broken mirror. And then, 17 Alpha spoke. Not aloud. Through the ship. Through the jungle. Through the silencer itself. She hijacked the pulse signature. Injected human emotion into its core stream. Pain. Loss. Memory. Love. All the things that made us human. And the silencer hesitated. Only for a second. But it hesitated. And I moved. I leapt from the wreckage, whisper harness burning red, and plunged the signal shard straight into its core. The feedback was instant. The entity shrieked, not with sound, but with static that tore across dimensions, and collapsed into a convulsing pool of melted logic, not destroyed, but corrupted, infected, with the very thing it tried to erase. We stood in the silence after, shaking. Smoke drifted from my armor. 17 Alpha collapsed, systems failing, lips trembling. I caught her, held her like a twin I never asked for, but couldn't imagine losing now. She looked up at me. Did it learn? She asked weakly. I nodded. Yeah, it knows what we are now. No, I said softly. Now it knows what we feel. The jungle didn't cheer our victory. It simply resumed breathing. The birds sang again. The leaves dripped once more. The ground cooled. Life moved on, indifferent, unaware that the deadliest weapon the Aelyd had ever deployed had just been broken. But we weren't moving on. Not yet. 17 of us had survived the silencer. Now we circled around a shattered console where 17 Alpha lay, flickering, twitching, dying. I knelt beside her. Her synthetic skin was torn, seams along her jaw twitching as the neural link degraded. The light in her eyes dimmed, not like a machine shutting down, but like a person trying to stay awake. You downloaded yourself into the malachite. I whispered. She nodded, used its old neural grid as a pressure vessel to flood the silencer with contradiction, emotion, memory, meaning, everything the Aelyd tech wasn't built to handle. You killed it, Carol muttered. She coughed a laugh. No, I infected it. With us. We carried her into the malachite's medical bay, half working, its lights flickering like tired stars. SEF did what he could, rerouted power, rewired fusion cells to stabilize her vitals. But she wasn't a standard machine. She was part human, part Aelyd, part something else. And now she was failing. They'll come again, she said. I looked up sharply. What? The Aelyd won't ignore a silencer failing. Not after what I did to it. They'll send others. Not to study. Not to capture. Her gaze met mine, sharp with truth. They'll come to cleanse. We only had one chance left. Send a warning back to Earth. But the malachite's quantum comm array was fused. No FTL. No long range. I wanted to scream. So close and still alone. Then one of the prisoners, a Voltar exile named Schur, stepped forward. I saw what you did, he said to me. What she did. No human, no machine, has ever defied a silencer. Not like that. We got lucky, I said. We were desperate. No, he replied. You were human. He opened a cracked satchel and pulled out a crystalline lens, part Aelyd tech, part stolen relay. We smuggled this. A stealth pulse array tuned to coalition relay signatures. Limited range, but he handed it to me, enough to punch a message into orbit. We didn't hesitate. We hardwired the lens to the malachite's emitter dish. Wrote the message in code. 47 seconds of transmission. Coordinates. Warning. Evidence. And one phrase repeated 3 times, in 3 languages. They are copying us. Do not trust what looks human. I stood beside the emitter as it launched the signal into the void, praying it pierced the silence above Viral 7, praying someone would hear it. Because what the Aelyd feared wasn't our firepower. It wasn't our ships. It was the idea that humans could not be predicted, that we were not bound to design or control or logic. We broke pattern. We chose. That night, I sat with 17 Alpha in the med bay, her breathing slow, her skin dimmed to a faint pulse of blue. You gave us a chance, I said. All of us. She looked at me, eyes heavy but present. No, she murmured. You did. I was just the echo. I shook my head. No, you were more. She smiled barely. I wasn't made to live. I was made to end threats. Quietly, efficiently. Then you malfunctioned beautifully. I whispered. Silence. Then, you know what they never understood? She asked, her voice barely above a breath. What? That the strongest part of a human soul isn't survival. She reached up, touched my hand. It's sacrifice. And with that, her eyes dimmed. The light in her chest flickered once and went out. Carol burned her. Not out of hate, but honor. We used vines for the pyre. Laid her armor down with care. The pulse shard she once wore now sat embedded in the wall above the comm dish. A warning, a beacon. We watched the flames rise. All of us quiet. Even the jungle seemed to mourn. We didn't speak of vengeance. Not anymore. This wasn't about revenge. This was about a future they were trying to erase. So we buried the past. We lifted what weapons we had, and we looked to the sky, because we knew what was coming, and we knew what we had to become. The signal made it. I don't know how I know, I just do. Somewhere light years away, some coalition outpost picked up our burst. Maybe a comms officer raised an eyebrow at the human DNA signature embedded in the pulse code. Maybe someone in a dusty command center leaned forward when they read the phrase we sent 3 times. They are copying us. Do not trust what looks human. I don't know who heard it first, but I know it mattered, because 10 days later, the stars changed. The Aelyd came back, just like 17 Alpha said they would. Only this time, they didn't come to capture. They came to erase. The sky cracked open with gravity spikes and inverted light. Their new ships weren't cruisers or hives. They were black, silent, angular monoliths, shaped like blades buried in space-time. Each one bled distortion. Each one landed without sound. And each one unleashed something worse than silencers. They called them whispers. Not machines. Not soldiers. Imitations. They look like us. Move like us. Spoke with voices stolen from the prisoners they'd once studied. They didn't attack openly. They infiltrated, confused, disrupted, until you didn't know who was human anymore, until doubt became its own weapon. And in that silence, the Aelyd would strike. But this time, we were ready. We were the ones who lit the fires. We turned the jungle into a testing ground, laced with traps, signal sniffers, chemical markers that only reacted to true human biology. We carried encoded pass signals in our own blood. If you didn't bleed right, you didn't belong. We stopped whispering. We roared. I led the strike on their primary node. It sat where the first hive had once been, rebuilt bigger, stronger, armored with deception and algorithms. But it still pulsed, still throbbed with that same arrogant belief that we could be replicated, then deleted. I wore 17. Alpha's shard on my arm like a badge. Her code had been recorded, preserved in the Malachite's drive. We'd seeded it into every field rig, every pulse round. Her final moments looped on repeat. Sacrifice, identity, choice. It wasn't just a story. It was a virus now, a memory that corrupted their false reflections. The fight was brutal, close, dirty. We didn't fight to win. We fought to remind them that they couldn't understand us. Because humans don't just resist. We adapt, we evolve, and when pushed to the edge, we become something else. I watched one of the whispers glitch in front of me, face melting between my own and someone else's. It looked at me with wide, confused eyes. "What are you?" it asked in a voice half mine, half static. I smiled, and I said what I should have said the moment they took my weapon. "I'm the part you couldn't copy." Then I pulled the trigger. The jungle burned for 3 days, and when the smoke cleared, we were still standing. Not all of us, but enough. Caro had taken a hit shielding a child we found in the wreckage. She couldn't have been more than 10, her eyes ancient with fear. SEF lost half a leg and laughed about it. I didn't laugh. Not until I saw what hung above the ruins of the enemy node. A message, broadcast in Aelyd binary. Just one line. We cannot defeat what we cannot comprehend. We stayed on Viral 7. Made it ours. Earth sent relief, finally. Reinforcements. Medics. They tried to take command. We let them talk. But they didn't lead us. Because command belongs to those who bled for it. To those who saw the end and kept going. To those who know what it means when the enemy takes your weapon. And you realize you never needed it. Because they didn't understand that our weapons aren't metal or plasma or code. Our greatest weapon is the will to change. The capacity to choose, even when everything else is stripped away. So let this be the record. They took my rifle. They burned my team. They made a clone of me to destroy what I was. And in doing so, they created what I became. I am not a soldier anymore. I am not just human. I am the memory that survives the machine. I am the echo that cannot be controlled. I am the weapon that watches back.